I'm Ben Harrington. I'm the CEO of the Mental Health Association of East Tennessee. I've been with the agency 29 years. The agency was founded in 1948 by Mrs. Helen Ross McNabb, the same lady who founded McNabb Center. Yeah, so she was a very influential person. Founded McNabb Center, then realized that the center shouldn't be advocating for building mental health services in the community because that looked a little bit self-serving, and so then created a separate nonprofit organization, and we started as the Mental Health Association of Knoxville, and we've grown significantly over 75 years. We now serve entire East Grand Division of Tennessee. We have staff in Chattanooga, staff here in Knoxville, of course, and also in the Tri-Cities area. Our programs and services are fairly well linked together. We are a early intervention and advocacy organization, and that means we really are focusing our effort on intervening earlier. One of the age-old problems with mental health is folks typically ignore symptoms or dismiss them, belittle them, that sort of thing, and think, that's not what it is. Couldn't be, not me, right? The stigma gets involved. So they wait until those symptoms get much more profound, more acute, longer lasting, and then eventually everything blows up, and that's at what we call stage 4 of mental illness. And that's the wrong place to be intervening, because that's when it's a suicidal crisis. The person might be in the emergency room because they've attempted to harm themselves. They may have become involved with law enforcement, and they're in the backseat of a police car. Not a good situation, so that's the wrong time to be intervening. So we want to try to intervene upstream. That's why we do what we do in schools. We also have other intervention programs in the community. But we try to move things upstream. The biggest program we provide is called Mental Health 101. And Mental Health 101 actually started in fall of 2000 at 2 schools here in Knox County. We were asked on the same day, in the span of about 15 minutes, could you come teach our kids about depression? And we said yes, but we said we also have to be able to teach about suicide prevention, because depression and suicide are so closely connected. And so we went from not having a program to all of a sudden we've got a program, and we've got less than 2 weeks to figure out what we're going to do. And so we created this program called Mental Health 101, and for the first 6.5, 7 years, it was just solely delivered in high schools, and we also knew we should be doing the program in middle school, but there wasn't really readiness yet by the schools to do so. So eventually, after about 6 years, Knox County Schools said, we like what we see, but could we do this earlier when kids are younger? And it created a nice problem to have. So we did create a middle school version of Mental Health 101. We actually have different curricula for 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, as well as high school. And so that allows us now to serve 34,000 kids at 160 schools, 45 school districts in 35 counties, from Chattanooga northward to the Kentucky border, east to Virginia and North Carolina. Yeah, we have a team of staff. We have a senior director of outreach and education services who coordinates all that programming, and then we have a regional coordinator in Chattanooga and another one in Tri-Cities. And so they coordinate a team of mental health educators. So they recruit a school, they find a date that's going to work with someone's schedule, and then they match up the educator to the school and they get assigned. And so we go to a school and we may teach 3 or 4 classes in a day at that particular school. You know, on any given day we can be in as many as 6 or 7 schools. Normally we're in like 4 or 5 a day. There's a community-based version of Mental Health 101 where we can go to a workplace and we can provide mental health education in that workplace. And depending on what they want, we can tailor the conversation or the training. Sometimes an employer wants us to come in and train all their supervisors because, you know, supervisors may have a number of people that they work with, and their job is to not only do the work that they do at their particular organization, but the supervisor has to be able to recognize who might be struggling and or overly stressed, that sort of thing. And so part of that work can be all about trying to help that supervisor recognize who needs help and then steer them into help. They're never going to be taught to diagnose anybody. That's not what we do. But I'm really proud of that program as well as the work we've done here in the agency, because it's enabled us to be the recipient of a significant recognition this year. We received the Bell Seal for Workplace Mental Health from Mental Health America, our parent organization. And so we're the first employer in Tennessee to receive that recognition. And that means we are supporting our employees in the way that they need to be supported to be able to, you know, work in today's working environment. If they need health care, we've got health care. If we need to take time off due to, you know, stress at work, that sort of thing, we provide mental health days. We have a number of other benefits that we provide that are really geared towards supporting the employee to thrive at work, regardless of what's going on. And if they need, you know, time for mental health care, they get time for mental health care. We have a peer recovery call center, and we actually started that program in 2013, but it is staffed by persons with lived experience. That means they have a diagnosis and they're in long-term recovery. And what that program is all about is helping folks find the right resources to their situation, but then asking the follow-up question, can we call you back? And every caller that calls here is stunned when we ask, can we call you back? Because they've been getting shirked around by all sorts of other entities as they've called various places. And, you know, they felt horrible. They felt like no one wanted to support them and didn't care about them. And here we are saying, yeah, we can help you find a place and we care enough, we want to call you back. And they're stunned. They're even more stunned when we actually do. But that creates a relationship between the client and our peer recovery call specialist. And so that individual is able to keep in contact with those caller clients and build a rapport. And that rapport building, that trust building, that lifeline, if you will, that phone a friend, makes it so that client engages in treatment at a much higher rate than the national average. In fact, 74% of our callers enter and stay engaged in treatment compared to about 35% nationally when they don't have a peer support specialist to help them out. The thing is this, during the COVID pandemic, mental health needs of the public certainly grew. And the symptoms of anxiety, symptoms of depression, certainly became a lot more profound in so many people. In fact, before the pandemic, 1 person in 5 needed mental health care. But during the pandemic, that changed so profoundly, it became 2 people in 5. So literally doubling the number of people who need mental health care. That would also exponentially increase the number of people that would start to seek help and try to figure out, do they have a mental health treatment need? So what happened there is, during the pandemic, numbers of people seeking the answer to their question, do I have a mental health condition? Do I need to seek help? Started to change dramatically because people went to free mental health screening resources that we had and started to take their mental health test. And those numbers started to change dramatically. And so in the middle of 2020, we realized, we need to do something different here. If all these people are now help seekers trying to figure this out, there's thousands more that haven't even started that process. So we have to promote the opportunity to find your need. Do you need mental health care? Is it stress or something worse? How am I going to find out? Well, here's your quick link to take a test here on your phone, your iPad, your computer, from the anonymity of your home, your car, sitting on your front porch, and you can get your results in a matter of seconds, actually. I think things had been gradually moving that way anyway, because of social media and because of the wealth of information available online. Stigma had started to erode, and the more well-known individuals that talked openly about their mental health needs, the more people felt comfortable telling others about their own mental health needs. So that was important. But then along came the pandemic, and you had this tidal wave of folks now needing mental health care, and it became a lot more obvious as folks were cooped up too, and so as they were cooped up, folks got to observe, what was going on with, whoever else they were sharing an abode with, and they were able to recognize folks who were struggling. And so thankfully, the media at that time started to realize, hey, this is a parallel deal. And they wanted to cover that story too. And so they did, and we were able to help all the media outlets cover that story, because it became a way to keep telling the story to thousands of people all across the region, and keep the story that mental illness is real, diagnosable, and treatable in front of everybody. If we ever kept our mouths shut, then we would just be doing what centuries of stigma had done previously. So we had to go public. And thankfully, we received some grant funding that allowed us to advertise mental health screenings too. And so pre-pandemic, we screened 3,000 people. Last year, we screened 15,000 people. So there's a lot of folks that are trying to figure out their mental health treatment need. And 80% are screening positive, and 75% of those who screen positive start to do something about it. So it really is a great opportunity to move things upstream. Rather than waiting till it's a crisis, people are now seeking help upstream, which is the beauty of, what we've been trying to preach for a long time. There are a number of folks that have experienced trauma in their lives, and in fact, Tennesseans in general have experienced more adverse childhood experiences than residents of other states have. And so that's the hard thing. And we know the more folks that have had 4 or more ACEs, as they're called, are more likely to develop anxiety and depression and suicidality and substance abuse problems. Well, we've got a lot of folks in that situation, and so the only way we can prevent that generational trauma is we've got to be doing the things and positioning all those things in line to support. We've got to intervene in schools, help young people recognize serious stressful events or adverse events and understand what they are, develop positive coping skills instead of the poor coping mechanisms, right? And then they will start to build some resiliency because of that. Then if we have resources that allows that individual to seek help and get help and stay engaged in treatment, then we have a fighting chance at building very resilient individuals because we've positioned all those things and with the community positioned their resources so that if we help identify someone early upstream, now there are all these places. Well, we're not addressing the school safety issue. We're trying to go upstream of that scenario. There are folks that want others to believe that dangerous school situations like a shooting are the result of people with mental illness. It's usually not. It's usually the result of someone who has an axe to grind, some sort of grievance. And so that is also true if it's a shooting at a business too, right? And those things, even though they are more prevalent nationally, right? They're not so prevalent locally, right? And so the thing I would try to remind folks about is that, we have to do what we can do, and our job is to, intervene earlier in schools and try to help as many young people as possible. Identify they may have a treatment need, they may not be coping well with certain stressful events, that sort of thing, and then help them understand how to either seek help or develop different coping strategies. So that's important. And then that also means we're going to need to advocate for the right resources to be available at a school, so that if you are a student at Farragut or Bearded, I know y'all rivals, or West, it doesn't matter. If you do become a help seeker, it's better if you have those resources right there at your fingertips at school, because if you have to leave the school to be able to access, it's highly unlikely that you will actually get into those services. Or if you go, you're not coming back to school the same day. You've gone to an appointment, I'm not coming back. So it makes more sense if we try to embed some services at a school so that people can enter the service and come back to class and they're not missing half the day or all the day, that sort of thing. That becomes a issue with regards to staffing and space and all this stuff, but that's just logistics. The most important thing is that we help the young person identify their need and get the help that they need, and get everyone's head out of the sand over the deal, And you went to Farragut, You know, there was probably some sand that kids were sticking their heads in, or faculty, staff, administration. You know, and then we know what happened, right? And the unfortunate thing is 3 young people took their lives. The very positive thing that happened afterwards was the school system and the school's response. The kids spoke up and they said, we're not having it anymore, right? And that was very, very powerful. The administration, even though a lot of fingers were pointed, they turned around, and by that summer they had us scheduled to come into Farragut High School to teach every student in the building that September. Didn't cost the town of Farragut a nickel, didn't cost the county school system a nickel. The MHA said, we've got a grant from the state, you tell us what dates and how many classes we'll be there teaching it. The principal also lined up in-service training for the parents, and also lined up an opportunity to do in-service training for all the faculty at the school. And so their response was spot on, what needed to happen. Now, you were there before that took place. Ideally, best case scenario, we wouldn't have to see 3 suicides for us to get there, okay? But long story short, they responded, and we were able to continue, to partner with the school system to make sure those sorts of resources are made available to young people in middle and high schools, as well as faculty at the schools and parent groups. Interestingly enough, when Farragut turned around and wanted to schedule us to be in the building every day in September to do provide mental health 101, and Farragut's a fairly large school, 2,500 kids, I think, even to this day. They sent out the parental permission slip, and only 13 families said no. Now, I'm still irked about that to this day, because if we just had 3 kids take their lives, why on earth are we saying no to this, right? So, there could be a little bit of pushback, but it's okay. We understand it. It's an opportunity for some dialogue if someone wants to talk to us about it. One of the interesting things about the pandemic is COVID did really weird things to people who had it. And from the mental health perspective, people who had a mental health diagnosis before COVID ever happened, and then they developed COVID, had their symptoms of their mental health condition worsen. And they worsened to the point that the normal treatments were no longer going to work. And so that's a very interesting situation, because COVID is the reason why. COVID caused that situation to worsen and treatments not work. So it meant folks had to go back to the drawing board to figure it all out again. But what's very interesting is if you put that on one set of tracks and then you ask yourself, geez, did that happen with physical conditions too? Oh yeah, it did. Yeah, I know people that were not allergic, had COVID, and now they're allergic to all sorts of stuff, right? I had COVID twice last year in the month of June, and it has damaged my lungs. So that if I get sick with a normal head cold and it gets into my chest, it's something that's going to affect me for about 30 days. Whereas normally I'd kick it in about a week, right? And so COVID has changed things. And so what I would just ask people to understand is maybe what you thought years ago, it's time to be a little bit more open-minded to just see if there are any other ways to interpret it. Because there were a ton of people that didn't have a mental health issue before the pandemic, and then that doubled during the pandemic. And the number of people developing anxiety symptoms during the pandemic is the big driver towards why we have 2 people in 5 now needing mental health care instead of 1. And so it is also why the U.S. Prevention Task Force just recently suggested to primary care doctors all across the country, screen every adult for anxiety once a year, too. And that's because so many people have developed, the symptoms of depression and anxiety during the pandemic. And those symptoms started during the pandemic. They're not going away. I think a common misperception is when folks often think about mental illness, they think it's, if someone is to ask for help, you're dealing with what someone's perception was some time ago. And then you're dealing with, well, how is media describing this in whatever we see it in? Is it television? Is it the news? Or is it in a movie you've seen, right? And so folks might have had a negative perception, and then the media certainly didn't do anyone any favors, right? And so now someone gets to the place where, I need to seek help. And a lot of people perceive that reaching out for help as a sign of weakness. And so the perception of weakness really couldn't be further from the truth. It's actually, if someone is reaching out for help, it's the strongest thing anyone can ever do, right? Because it's not weak. I mean, you just did something that most people for the last 100 years certainly would never ever do because of the way they felt they would be perceived. Violent, scary, dangerous, all of that. And so it's the bravest thing, the strongest thing anyone could ever do. Whether it's a man or woman, it doesn't matter. Bravest thing anyone could ever do. Say, I need help. So the Mental Health Association is a organization that provides many valuable services in our community, whether it's early intervention in schools or whether it's client services like our call center, which can be accessed by calling 865-584-9125. Or if someone wants to go online and take a free mental health screening, that screening address is MHAET.com/screenings.